Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to our theme session, Living with Volatility, Survival, Revival and Growth. I request President ACMA to welcome our dignitaries for this session. Dr. Pawan Goenka, the chairperson of Scale Committee and former MD and CEO of Mahindra & Mahindra, as also Kavan Mukhtia, the partner and automotive leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Deepak.
Thanks, Vinny. Ladies and gentlemen, I am indeed very delighted to welcome a very esteemed and distinguished thought leader, Dr. Pawan Goenka, in our theme session on Living with Volatility, Survival, Revival and Growth. Dr. Goenka, you've been my mentor and guide, and it's my profound privilege, sir, that you have been able to join our annual session today. Your contribution to our industry is well known, and especially in this crisis period, it has been more than exemplary. As the chairperson of the Committee for Advanced Local Value Add and Exports, popularly known as SCALE, under the Ministry of Commerce and Industries, you have been providing leadership to over 24 sectors today to become globally competitive. We in the components sector are particularly delighted as the auto components sector has been identified as a champion sector for exports. This indeed reflects your deep passion to support our industry and create a robust global automotive supply chain in India that can withstand the vagaries of time and live up to its full potential. We are eager for your message and direction to the industry. Welcome again, sir. Kavan, thank you for you and your team for engaging with us as a knowledge partner. I'm sure that we will take home valuable lessons from your incisive presentation. Once again, a hearty welcome to all our audience for joining in this theme session. And over to you, Vinny.
Thank you, Deepak. Kavan, the screen is yours. We are eagerly looking forward to the presentation on the theme of our event, Living with Volatility, looking for nuggets on survival, revival, and growth. So please go ahead. Yeah.
What I will do is that the portion that I was going to draw from Kavan's presentation, I'll probably do it in two parts. I'll do my other part first and then come back for commenting on what Kavan is going to be covering. Okay? If that's all right. So again, thank you very much, Deepak and Vinny, for inviting me yet again to be a speaker at the ACMA annual convention. I have lost count of how many times I have spoken in this convention. I always look forward to it. For me personally, between last convention and today, there is a significant change that I have become from insider of the industry to a well-wisher of the industry. And again, thankful that even after not being insider, you invited me to come and talk to this gathering. Over the 27 years that I have worked in the industry in India, I have had close interactions with ACMA members, with Mahindra suppliers very intensely over the various product developments that we have worked on. Mahindra supplier meets, I have welcomed you about 17 or 18 times. And during my speeches in ACMA and Mahindra supplier meet, I have coaxed you, I have nudged you many times for various things that we have talked about even today by previous speakers. And I have done that because you had given me a license to be provocative. And if any time during these times I have crossed the line, I do beg your apology for that. A lot has changed in the industry in the years that I have been associated with the industry in India for 27 years. Technology, the sort of design and many other things. But three things that I am most proud of in terms of changes that have happened. The first one is how much we have moved in quality from where we were in late 90s to where we are today. And as Mr. Bhargav said that, yes, there is still some distance to go, but some tremendous progress. The second thing is how much we are able to do product development in India, both at the supplier level and at the OEM level. I remember the days of mid-90s when we could hardly do anything. And again, there is some distance to cover, but we have come a long ways. But the third thing which is the most important thing for today's gathering, is how our supplier ecosystem has evolved over these 25 years. Again, going back to mid-90s to where we are. I think Indian supplier base today can rub shoulders with anyone in the world and can compete with anyone in the world. And I thank you all ACMA members for making our supplier ecosystem to become world-class, to become global. And there's no way Indian auto industry could have become a global industry without the supplier base becoming what it is today. Now, as a well-wisher of the industry, I will always continue to serve the industry as long as ACMA and SIAM members want me to be involved. And on lighter vein, since now I don't have to be concerned about delivering anything, I can be more aggressive in talking about what the industry should be doing, because I know that you have to deliver and I have to only talk, and talking is always cheap. Before I go on to my speech, I saw this morning a double spread advertisement of XUV 700 with 36 of our global suppliers being recognized in that advertisement. I do not know if Rajesh and Vijay had planned it to coincide with the annual convention or annual meeting today, but if it's a coincidence, it's a nice coincidence that it happened today. I would like to personally thank these suppliers who I worked with very closely during development of XUV 700 over 3-4 years. And really, all of you have worked very hard to bring out a product that India will be proud of. I have no doubt about it. Many of you would have driven the vehicle now. This is not a plug for XUV 700. It's just as an outgoing MD of the company, thank you to all the suppliers for having worked with us so closely for this product and the other products. Now, is Kavan ready now? No, not yet. Okay. So last year we had talked about shaping a new normal, and all of us were looking at COVID situation, and about this time we were thinking that we are just about getting out of it. Year before, actually, I had talked about in my speech about how slowdown is not a terrible thing to waste. And at that time, we had no idea that COVID is going to be upon us and how we have to manage the present without mortgaging the future. And I would like to think that the industry, including supply industry, has done extremely well in managing very difficult times that we have faced since March 2020. In fact, I think we have battled much more than we could imagine at any given point of time. In the last 12 months, while we thought that we probably be completely out of it, last 12 months actually have brought in some new challenges from supply chain side, the chip shortage that at this time last year we were not at all expecting to be a problem. Commodity price increases, freight increases, geopolitical situation, and of course, the second wave of COVID that we were not expecting when we were talking at this time last year. So I'd like to applaud the industry for having managed all of these things remarkably well. But for the chip shortage, I think we will be over all the problems very shortly. And I hope the chip shortage comes under control. And then I think we will not be looking back at all. I think worst is behind us and we will move forward with resilience. Now, I'm the 7th or 8th speaker here today, and by that time, almost everything that's worth talking about has been talked about. So I would probably end up repeating a few things that have been said by previous speakers today and somewhat yesterday also. Now, I was going to do it in two parts. The first part was to draw upon from what Kavan was going to be covering in his speech of living with volatility, survival, revival, and growth, which was the theme of today. It will not be fair on my part to flash his slides because I was going to flash some of his slides. So if we could put on the slide, but skip the first 4 slides that were taken from Kavan's presentation, first 5 slides. Can you flash the slides, please? Go back to previous slide. I think I'll just cover that. Go back to previous slide, previous one before. Okay, this slide probably will be a little bit out of place without having built the background from Kavan's presentation. But I thought I'll talk about it now. The term that I wanted to introduce today, after listening to Kavan and after listening to the various framework that he was presenting on volatility, on survival, on revival, and on growth. And I was thinking yesterday, actually, that what does it all sum up to? And a word that came to my mind, which I had heard previously but doesn't get talked about too much, is anti-fragile. The industry needs to be anti-fragile. Now, anti-fragile is a word, I don't know if you have heard this before. It's been around since 2012, but not used a lot. And I'll read the definition of it. Some things or businesses benefit from shocks. They thrive and grow when exposed to volatility, randomness, disorder, and stressors, and love adventure, risk, and uncertainty. Anti-fragility is beyond resilience or robustness. The resilient resist shock and stay the same, but anti-fragile gets better. So this is how I would like to see our industry, the auto component industry and auto OEM industry, to be anti-fragile. With every shock that we have, we come out stronger than before. And I think we demonstrated that in the last 3 or 4 slowdowns that we have had. And I also see the making of that happening with the COVID crisis that we have had also. And again, without Kavan's presentation, it becomes a little bit out of place for me to say this, and perhaps it will become clearer once you read Kavan's presentation to see why I'm saying what I'm saying. So one word, the takeaway for ACMA members today is that we need to make our industry anti-fragile. Now I move to part 2 of what I was going to talk about, which is the Atmanirbhar Bharat. As Deepak mentioned in the introduction, and that I've been working with Government of India. Next slide, please. Government of India, Ministry of Commerce, and DPIIT on the scale committee, where our focus is how do we increase value add in India, manufacturing value add in India in different sectors. Now I'm borrowing from my presentation last year, when I had talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat and given a definition for Atmanirbhar Bharat. And as I said last year, I'm just repeating from it, Atmanirbhar is first to take pride in what we do and what our country does. It is about not being dependent on any other country for our needs. It is about removing all our business disabilities. It is about being world-class in our product and service offerings. It is about innovation, developing technology, and creating a pull for our offerings. It's about inviting all the global companies to come and make in India for the world. And what it is not is an exclusionary or isolationist approach towards trade and investment. It is not about manufacturing without building competencies and without having internal competitiveness. It is not about stalling imports completely. And I think this is something that sometimes gets misunderstood or misinterpreted as to what Atmanirbhar Bharat is. But I would like to say that one very important thing that we have to keep in mind, that while we welcome all import, while we welcome investments, our markets, Indian markets, must add value to our economy. And this is something that we have to look at when we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat. Can I go to the next slide, please? Now, again, I am bringing this from last year's presentation. I had put down 5 thought provokers during the presentation. The first one was, can we and should we delink from imports completely? And the answer that I had given was absolutely not. No way we can think about an economy that is delinked from global economy, that is delinked from import. And there's no way we can do everything on our own efficiently and effectively. But the question to ponder is that the auto industry, which is one of the most Atmanirbhar industry in India, and it is acknowledged by everyone that auto industry has done extremely well in becoming self-reliant in India. Even this industry, for industry size of just over $100 billion, imports $25 billion of components today. So the question is that do we really need to import $25 billion worth of components? Now, this has been talked about earlier by Amitav Kant, by Mr. Bhargav. And if you look at what we are importing, I see no reason why India needs to import glass, bearings, castings, wheel rims, and components like that. And I also see that we are not doing enough in advanced technology components. We don't make any automatic transmission. We don't make sensors. We don't make any ADAS equipment, though, of course, that is new. We have very little value addition in infotainment. We don't make too many EV parts. We don't even make sunroofs, which are gaining popularity in India. And so therefore, we obviously need to introspect as component industry on while we don't want dealing from import, but is there room for significant reduction in what we are importing and how much we are importing? And obviously, the industry has taken a target of going down by about 25% from $25 billion. That target we need to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years. The second question that I had posed was, do we have right to get a sizable share of global value chain in auto components? Now, the question here is that while we talk about Indian automotive component industry being mature, being very high quality, having competitive cost, but yet there's an hesitation from all the multinational suppliers who have a large presence in India to use India as part of their global value chain. Now, for us to really become the 5% export that Mr. Bhargav talked about, participant in the global trade, we have to become part of the global value chain for large multinational automotive suppliers, because otherwise we will not be able to get to that level. And we need to question, what is it? What is a disabler that stops the multinationals from using India as part of the global value chain? Why is it, I'd asked this question last time, why is it that none of them have a mother plant in India from where they export to the world? And while there are multiple mother plants in China and even in other Southeast Asian countries. And rather than asking them the question, we in India need to ask ourselves the question as to why they're not finding it appropriate or desirable or a pull for doing so. And the KL committee has looked at this in a large measure, and I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide also. Now, third one is, can we become a global hub for shared mobility EVs? Now, EVs obviously are the hottest subject right now. A lot of it was talked about yesterday. Mr. Amitav Kant, even yesterday and today again, made it very clear that EVs are here to stay, and those who don't participate in it will probably be losing out on a growth potential. But from last time or last year when we were talking, at that time the average monthly sale of passenger vehicles was about 200 electric. Now, after 1 year, it's 500. 500 vehicles per month we are selling after talking about electric vehicles for 4 to 5 years. 500 after having 5% GST, after having FAME benefit. That's 0.3%, less than 0.3% of our monthly sales that we have. And at this pace, I don't think we'll be able to achieve the aspirations that we have for the electric vehicles in a country, and we will lose out on a very, very big opportunity for India to become global in one sub-segment of automotive industry. And the opportunity for localizing, we have talked about quite a bit, is there, but it's not going to happen in the way we are progressing today. There are two things that I believe need to happen. One is the OEMs have to nurture local suppliers. It is very easy and convenient for all of us to source from outside for EV components because it's something new, something that has not been developed in India. We were in the same boat 30 years ago. When it came to other components. We are in that situation today for electric vehicles, and OEMs have to go out of their way, nurture the suppliers, local suppliers, and develop expertise in India. And also suppliers have to invest before demand. If you all keep waiting for when the demand will happen, by the time demand happens, it is too late. You have missed the bus because somebody else is supplying from China or a Korea or a Japan. And the OEMs won't easily switch over from that to Indian suppliers. So this is one of the biggest opportunity that we have, and one of the biggest concern that I have, that we are not moving fast enough on electric vehicles in spite of everybody wanting for it to happen, and everybody saying it's just around the corner. The fourth question I had asked was, when and how do we become truly global? I'd mentioned last year that there's only one supplier from India who is in top 50. And I would like to think that we need to think big. We need to think some of the supplier groups, can they become in top 50 in the world? Can we aim, target that 5 out of 50 will be coming from India, of the Indian sort of base in about 8 to 10 years time from now? And this will require organic as well as inorganic growth. It will require a lot of things that again have been talked about in the past, and I won't repeat any of those. And the last question that I asked was, do we have the mindset to be Atmanirbhar? And I think this is all about grit. This is all about an inner desire that India has to become Atmanirbhar, and I, no matter who I am, whatever I am doing, I am going to contribute to it. Now, again, sometimes to become Atmanirbhar, we have to move away from the most convenient, most comfortable route to run our business to something that is a little bit more challenging, that is more work required. But again, remember that the Indian auto industry has a strong supply base today. Because without knowing the word Atmanirbhar, without knowing the word self-reliant, OEMs and suppliers work together for the last 25, 30 years to come to where we are today. We have to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing and go to the next sort of plateau of being Atmanirbhar. We'll have to make some short-term compromises. The OEMs may end up paying a little bit higher price for a short while if they're going to become Atmanirbhar. The suppliers may have to let go of profit for a couple of years if they're going to start making in India what we are currently importing. But without that grit, we will remain stuck where we are. And I think if auto industry doesn't lead the way, then India probably will find it very difficult to become truly Atmanirbhar. Because everybody, believe me, when I'm looking at working on the scale committee, this is one thing that I have come to realize, which I didn't know when I was just associated with the auto industry, is that manufacturing industry looks up to automotive industry in leading the path to become self-reliant. They believe that no other industry has achieved the kind of self-reliance that we have achieved, and therefore we need to now go to the next plateau while others come to where we are today. Next slide, please. So in the scale committee, since Deepak talked about it, I'll just take a little bit from that. For becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat, we have talked about 3 legs, which are very obvious, no rocket science: increasing export, reducing import, and increasing domestic consumption. Now, as far as ACMA members are concerned, increasing domestic consumption will more or less rely on increasing the sales of vehicles in India, and probably more of a responsibility of the auto OEMs. And yesterday's conference, the SIAM annual convention, was more or less about that, on how to become, how to have bigger growth, higher growth in the industry. The numbers that I put down in the slide are not for automotive, but they're general for manufacturing, and therefore read those numbers that way. Like we have said, target 9% growth in domestic consumption from current level of 7%. I think in auto industry, 9% is not going to be sufficient. Auto industry has to grow 12-13% every year for the next 8 to 10 years, and Mr. Bhargava also mentioned that in his speech. The second thing is about reducing import, which is target to reduce 2/3 over 5 years. And I'll come to auto industry in a minute. And third is increasing export, again, target to double manufacturing export over 5 years. And we believe that if you look at the 24 sectors that the scale committee is looking at, there's a potential to add $350 to $380 billion of incremental value add in manufacturing over a period of 5 to 10 years, 5 to 8 years. Next slide, please. So I'm going to summarize what I have said in an action plan for automotive industry for Atmanirbhar Bharat. Some of it I've covered in a few minutes ago. Some of it I am taking from other speeches that have happened yesterday and today. So the first one is OEMs and suppliers have to work together to make advanced technology components in India. Today, as I said earlier, we are importing automatic transmission completely, sunroof, sensors, infotainment components and everything. And I think India now has the scale for these advanced technology components. Earlier, if you talked 5 years ago, 7 years ago, we didn't have a scale. Okay, there was a lot of SKD that was happening in India. India has now become virtually fully manufactured in India, or CKD, very little SKD. And therefore, there clearly is opportunity for advanced technology components, and whether Indian suppliers with Indian origin do on their own, or whether multinationals localize it in India, not so important, but we must start doing advanced technology components in India. And I can tell you, as Deepak knows, as Vinny knows, that MHI is putting a lot of emphasis right now. And in the PLI scheme also, they're looking ways and means to see how we can support advanced technology components becoming local. The second one is EV industry, to aggregate inputs to get scale in India. Now, our EV volumes are very small. If everybody starts developing their own components and goes to different suppliers, we will never get a scale to be justify localization. It's important that the OEMs come together and aggregate the demand for components so that we have enough scale in India. And that goes to for many things, not just for EV industry, but for electronics also. Same thing applies. And here I'm really concerned, as I said earlier, that there's too much import happening and there's not enough trust being put on making it local. Now, the argument given is that our volume is too small. Yes, that is true. Our volume is too small. But if we don't start today, we will miss the bus when the volume becomes large. So this is one of my biggest sort of concern. I'm repeating what I said a few minutes ago. Third one is Indian suppliers to invest in R&D and quality process to win overseas business. And when I'm saying win overseas business, I'm not talking about getting some 10 million, 15 million, $20 million worth of component supply for someone. I'm talking about big wins. If we are going to become a significant player, and Mr. Bhargav has given the number that we are exporting $15 billion worth out of 1.3 trillion trade of auto components, which is only about 1.3%. If you're going to become really big, we have to have big strikes. We cannot be happy with small incremental new volume or export volume to come in. And undoubtedly, R&D and quality processes will be extremely important to win big businesses. Now, the fourth item, again, I alluded to earlier, but this is very important. This is my appeal to all the multinational suppliers who have large businesses in India, and I have met with few of you separately to understand what it will take for you to start using India as a part of your global value chain and start exporting from India. And many of you have shown an inclination to do that and have talked about some impediments that you see. And again, in the scale committee, we are trying to look at those things and see how we can remove those impediments to incentivize you to start using India as a global value chain, because I think that will be the fastest way for India to grow its component export from India. The fifth item, again, I have talked to some of the global OEMs separately on how they can use India as a sourcing base for components for global consumption. And right now, though many of the many of the OEMs, global OEMs, have IPOs in India, and there is some sourcing in India. But again, I think it doesn't do justice to the ability that Indian supplier base has of supplying from India. There are many components where prices from India will be 15%, 12% cheaper than their current sources, but yet the global OEMs are not sourcing enough from India. And again, when I talk to the OEMs, they have talked to me about the concerns that they have, and we are trying to work on those and see if we can resolve that through the scale committee. And of course, catch-all statement, made in India vehicles to be globally competitive. And when I say globally competitive, it is not just in cost, but in technology, in quality, in design. We have to be very competitive, and the current level of export that we have from India, we should not be happy with whether these are cars made by Indian OEMs or by global OEMs, but the current level of export is very small. So next slide, please. So this is my last slide, where I just want to, this is borrowed from my scale committee presentation that I made last week in Delhi. And this is the recommendation that we have made to the government. And again, it's not specific to auto industry, it is overall for the 24 sectors that we're looking at. We need to look at 5 disabilities that India has, and this was specifically done for export, that India has for not being able to export to its full potential. The first one is cost of doing business. And the factors that contribute to it is in many industries. Auto is not one of them. India doesn't have large enough scale, but of course in some components India doesn't have large enough scale, and the industry needs to invest in scale. And this is perhaps a complaint that the government has from the industry, that industry is not investing enough, and they're waiting for demand before they invest in capacity, and therefore we get into a catch-22. The second one is factor cost that India has in terms of land cost, power cost, capital cost, and again, government is quite appreciative of these disabilities and trying to see what can be done, though there is no easy solution for it. The third one is infrastructure efficiency and logistic cost. It's well known that India's average logistic cost is 13%, whereas the global average is 8%. And a lot of work is happening right now on how we can bring it down from 13% level to 8%. The fourth one is labor productivity and skills, flexible labor policy. A lot of it has to be done by the industry itself. Some of it has to be done by the government. And finally, strengthening MSME sector. And this is where ACMA plays a big, huge role, because a large number of your members are MSME, the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, how to carry them along, how to bring them up in quality, in technology, in processes, and delivery. All of that becomes very important. ACMA has done an excellent job in that, if I could say that. The second item was ease of doing business. A lot of progress has happened, but we believe that there is still a lot of room before we can call ourselves a country where doing business is as easy as in many other developed countries or many other even emerging countries. Third one is market access through FTAs and PTAs. Won't spend too much time, but you are well aware that India does not have too many favorable FTAs, and more often than not, export from India attracts higher import duty in the destination country than many other countries. Fourth is technology and quality competitiveness, R&D and innovation. Required, again, enough talked about it, so I won't repeat. And finally, brand India for manufacturing. This is something that we are aware that we need to have a stronger manufacturing brand outside India. And we have talked about that quite a bit, and government is working on it. So if you can remove the slide, I'll just wrap up. So as I've said multiple times today and even before, that the Indian auto industry has the aspiration, Indian component industry has the ability to really become Atmanirbhar. We need the OEMs, the suppliers, and the government to work together. And I think in the last 12, 18 months, we clearly see that that happening, and a lot more close cooperation between suppliers and OEMs and the government of India. Indian auto industry had a dream run from 2002 to 2015-16. And I think it's time for us to sort of start the second wave of that dream run from 2021 to 2034. And also to realize that what got us here will not get us there. The industry has to become, using the word that I started with, anti-fragile, and become stronger with each shock that we get. We have to chart a new path where quality and technology are going to be our ticket to ride, and not mere labor cost arbitrage. The government of India recognizes that auto industry is a very important pillar of economic growth. Yes, we may have some complaints, some concerns about government's actions, but overall there is a strong appreciation for Indian auto industry. And working with the government, I have no doubt that Indian auto industry can become one of the strongest pillars, the strongest pillar of Indian economic growth. So again, I thank you for inviting me to the ACMA annual meeting. As usual, always enjoy, but of course, looking at some photographs doesn't do justice. And I hope that next year we'll be able to physically meet. While virtual is very good for efficiency, but I haven't met any of you for 18 months. And I would love to meet you guys as quickly as we're able to travel. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Goenka. That was really superb. I must say that you keep pushing us very hard.
Now I can do it much better because I don't have to deliver, as I said earlier.
Not just that. Oh, that's fun. I must say that, we thought we had arrived, we were resilient, and now you are saying you need to be beyond resilience, you have to be anti-fragile, but we take that challenge and we will not disappoint you. And thank you so much for the very pertinent message talking about the industry to focus on advanced technologies, to aggregate demand for electric mobility, to have scales, urging the multinationals to make India integral to their supply chain, asking IPOs and multinational to source more from India. Indeed, these are the steps that will make us Atmanirbhar, and also for talking to us about addressing factors of production in cost of doing business, addressing ease of doing business, addressing challenges in the FTAs, focusing again on R&D and technology, and last but not the least, brand building. And of course, quality and technology have to be the pillars on which our competitiveness will be built on. So thank you so much, sir. I'm sure Kavan is very nervous now after having heard you. So Kavan, I sort of hope you've regained your lost voice, and let's have you on.
Thank you very much, Vinny. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well, yeah.
Okay, finally. So, I think that was crisis management live, and, really, this was something which was totally unexpected. But let me start off with my presentation. Firstly, I would like to thank, ACMA leadership for giving PwC the opportunity to work on this very, very interesting study and be your knowledge partners. So I would like to thank President Deepak Jain, Vice President Sanjay Kapoor, and Director General Vinny. Thank you very much. So as we met together with the ACMA leadership, and we were brainstorming that, what really should be the objective of this study. So we came up with 3 very clear questions that we were looking for answers. First and foremost, what is the reason we are seeing so much of demand volatility? And is this volatility just because of the pandemic, or are we really looking at this being a long-term thing? Second question was, how are companies really coping with this volatility? How are they navigating through this journey? And are there certain best practices that we can uncover, which we can then share with the industry at large and help them deal with this, volatility? And the last question was really, is there a framework or a tool that we can capture these best practices in and share it with the industry so that it helps us prepare for this level of volatility? So over the next 25 minutes or so, I will walk you through some of the findings of our study. And this study was done over the last 2 months. It involved a very comprehensive review of global trends, brainstorming internally with ACMA leadership, with industry participants. I would also like to thank all the industry CXO leaders, both on the OEM as well as component supplier side, who participated in this study and had discussions with us. So what we are sharing is an extract of the full report, and you do have access to the full report. You can download it from this event site. And the full report talks about 20 best practices that we've been able to uncover as we spoke to and discussed with various industry participants. So with that, let me dive straight into the slide. So one thing which very clearly comes out, and Mr. Ashwini Gupta talked about it as well, the traditional thinking or the design principles in the automotive industry was really about stability. You have a clear demand plan and you try and match up supply with demand, you optimize your inventory and bring as much stability and predictability as you can. But unfortunately or fortunately, this paradigm is shifting completely. And we are going to see a period of volatility. And as can be seen from this chart, we mapped out the last 10 years and how it mapped out for the auto industry in India. And you can see there were peaks and troughs. And in our own assessment, this was a combination of various factors. For example, we had the shift to BS6 very recently, a regulatory change. We had, the tariff war. I would say that's geopolitical impact. We also have climate concerns and things that go with that. Now we have the chip shortage, supply chain constraints linked to whatever happened with the pandemic. This and many such factors, as has been brought out in this slide, will continue to impact the automotive industry. And we feel that the reason this volatility will continue over the next many years is there is a convergence of many of these factors happening at the same time. And this is what is really causing the volatility. So, the answer to our first question, really, as part of this study, was that the volatility will continue and therefore the industry must adapt and respond to it. Moving to the next slide. So, what are the causes? What are the real reasons for this volatility? First and foremost, the geopolitical environment that we are living in is very different. It's a different world order, and there is pulls and push between the East and the West. And we were at a point in time where globalization reached its nadir, and now in many ways we are swinging to the other end of the pendulum, with every country talking about nationalism, localization, making supply chains shorter. The impact of FTAs, I think that is really playing out in a big way. We talked about regulations. Recently, ESG, or environment, societal, and governance, has becoming a top priority at the boardroom level for CEOs around the world. The climate concern is really now not something which is a nice thing to do or a responsible business activity. It is the fundamentals of running business. And I think in that context, regulations for the auto industry, given that we are considered a polluting industry, are only going to get more stringent. Of course, we had the shift from BS4 to BS6. We saw it was quite a challenging one, but we did exceedingly well in standing up to that challenge. Now we have talks about the CAFE norms coming through. And, of course, on the safety side with NCAP, product recall, the RDE. And then there are investment related policies. We talked about how Mr. Khan talked about how scrappage policy has been announced, the PLI is in the works, the road tap. All these regulatory changes are, of course, going to have an impact on your business and the dynamics with which the supply chain will have to deal with the OEM. Of course, there are other key factors like business model changes, shifting consumer preferences, supply chain bottlenecks, and at the same time, technology changes. I'd like to spend a few minutes on what really are these big technology changes. One big thing that we are anticipating as 5G gets rolled out in the Indian environment, you are going to see vehicles getting even more connected and more value being delivered through the vehicles. And you are going to see, data monetization being a great opportunity for automotive OEMs, where the industry will converge in many ways with the technology world. Of course, Mr. Gupta also talked about how digital and digitization is table stakes now. On the right-hand side of this slide, I will not go into every technology that is out there, but what is also happening is the kind of consumer technologies we see in our home environment are going to come in and collide with the automotive industry. For example, with 5G coming in, you can have high stream video and content streaming within your vehicle. Is that a real opportunity? How are OEMs planning to play in that sense? And what new suppliers will come in? So these forces, when they come together, are creating great amounts of volatility. Going forward to the next slide. Clearly in this environment, while volatility will continue, our study shows that there is complete consensus. The next few years are going to be a year of rapid growth for the auto industry. Of course, the first phase will be recovery, but thereupon, over the next decade, we expect that the auto industry in India will continue in a growth mode. But yet, that will be accompanied with volatility. And one of the differences that we see this time from the years of past is that you are not really going to have a year of what we call a survival year, where you just sit quietly, not invest, and then wait for things to improve and get into a revival and the growth mode. We expect that these three states will coexist at the same time. And let me explain what we mean here. Different parts of the value chain may be in one of these three boxes. And the tough thing for leadership is, how do you really make decisions on investment while in some part of the business you are cutting costs and letting people go and maybe deferring investments. So I think this is really one of the challenges in the context of which we looked at this whole best practices. And as we spoke to companies and discussed with many of them, we picked six best practices that I want to highlight in my presentation today. But moving forward, what are some of the things that one needs to focus on? Can I have the next slide, please? So first and foremost, and now I'm talking about the phase survival or a state of survival, I think the most important best practice that came out is you do need a very robust, financial prudence mechanism, ability to really monitor your numbers very closely and then make decisions based on that. Risk management in the past was looked at as one of the hygiene factors, but now this is fundamentals of how one needs to run your business. You need to constantly monitor what are the new risks that are emerging, and at the same time, it's a good story as well, because as you monitor this risk, you will also find certain opportunities that one needs to act on. Break-even point reduction came out as a clear priority when it comes to the survival state. And most companies that we spoke to are said that they do have targeted campaigns within their organization to reduce their fixed cost and reduce the break-even points and look at new ways of manufacturing the products. And I think in that context, a stronger relationship with the suppliers became even more important, because that gives you the flexibility to scale up and scale down depending on the demand patterns. One of the interesting things that came up in a discussion, and we have a quote on the right hand side from when we spoke to CXO at an auto OEM, that going forward for suppliers, ability to manage volatility and business continuity is really going to be a differentiating capability. I think this was never in the equation in the past. And what the pandemic and the volatility has done is that auto OEMs have realized that it's not just about cost. It's about getting the right partner who has the ability to handle volatility, and that comes through by really partnering well with your tier 2 and tier 3 as well, as was mentioned by Mr. Bhargav as well as other speakers. Moving forward, one of the best practices that we want to really highlight here is about next slide, please. About how one of the companies that we spoke to was having a very robust finance function, and how they invested in transforming their finance function to really become a real-time business partner. And what did they do? They used technology. On the bottom of this slide, you can see two triangles. The first one is the traditional model of handling finance, where most of the effort and focus was on accounting and on recording the right transactions. Going forward, what you need from the finance function is a lot of deep insights, a lot of data mining and help in making decisions. You want real-time fast data so that you can make decisions and respond to the market requirement. Another clear thing that we found out as a best practice, companies that have invested in professionalizing their finance function and really not considering it as an ownership function, but more of a fiduciary function and a business partnership functions, have done well. And our suggestion to ACMA members at large and supplier community is to really focus on making your finance function very robust, because this is what is going to help you during the survival stage. Moving forward into the next slide, please. We had another best practice, very interesting, and I think this has never happened in the past. And it's about competition or co-competition and collaboration. And this is a great hedge when you're looking at survival. And we found one of the companies, of course, facilitated by their OEMs, they actually collaborated with their direct competitors. And they shared assets, or they shared their fixed assets and cross-leveraged some of the efforts. And this is one of the best practice that we want to highlight globally when we spoke to PwC Global Network as well. This is an emerging trend where seemingly direct competitors are willing to collaborate and share technology and create almost like a hedge against the volatility that is out there. Moving to the next slide, and now we will move to the stage which we call revival. With a survival mindset, one of the downside is very easily you can get in a very defensive frame of mind and stop investing. But what we found is that the leading companies did a great job in dealing with these two states at the same time. For example, one of the leading companies said that as the pandemic happened and the volatility increased, rather than deferring their digital investments, they actually preponed it. And what they were planning to do in the next 6 to 7 years, they accomplished in the next 1 year. And that's helped them, really invest in revival. And as things are now moving forward, they are able to do a lot more with high levels of productivity. Another key thing that came out is when you were living in an environment which was very stable, I think working with average talent was okay. But as the extent of complexity is growing in the auto industry, then clearly you need a different quality of talent, especially in your leadership team. And we found that one of the things that companies did really well in this tough time is and helped in to build and nurture the talent pool and really show them the bigger picture. Another example is how do you really go about developing new products at the time of downtime and use that time to really build new products as we go along. So we'll pick two best practices from this section as well. Next slide, please. First best practice, when on one hand you want to attract the best talent that is out there, and at the same time you have the cost pressure. So how do you really do this? And what we found, one of the companies that we spoke to, and few of the other companies that have done this, is to really identify who are your top 2 or 3% of the leadership team, or the top talent that you want to reward and are part of your strategic talent pool. And let's create mechanisms to reward this talent pool. And what was felt is that income alone will not be enough to really attract and retain this talent pool. So there wants to be a open-mindedness in terms of considering options like stock options and wealth creation options. And we see around the world, and even in India, we are seeing startups who are actively using this, and that has really made the talent pool very enthusiastic. Then you have the middle layer, which is really the bulk, and you want to make sure that these guys are productive, and therefore their compensation and remuneration should be linked to productivity. And then the third layer, which is doing more monotonous tasks, and of course that's a crucial layer as well. There the company strategy was, how can I bring greater automation, how can I bring greater levels of invest in robotics, etc., and then try and minimize or reduce the cost there. And they were also open to talent refresh in this environment. So we thought that this framework was really good and effective in pushing this forward. Moving to best practice number 4. Conscious of time, I'll move a little bit faster here. What we found, this company did exceedingly well in MSME, which anticipated customer demand really well. And in anticipation of a revival, they used the downtime when there was zero revenues and they were all locked up. Rather than sending their workforce back to their native place, they retained them in their facility and focused on new product development. They focused on getting a prototype done. And now when things are reviving, they are able to leverage that new product to drive growth. Moving forward into the growth phase, I think a lot has been talked about in terms of case and its impact. Can I have the next slide, please? Case and its impact. What we also need to talk about is, and Dr. Goenka mentioned this, that innovation is something that needs to happen, and it has to happen at a low cost and rapidly. And we believe that, clearly, startups can play a very crucial role in this. And as we spoke to the various companies and as part of our study, it came up very clearly that engagement with startup is a big priority for the supplier community as well as auto OEMs. And we feel that as we do this, definitely there will be need to bring greater talent pool within the organization. And one thing which also came up very clearly is that auto industry and auto component industry in particular needs to embark on the journey of professionalizing their leadership a little bit further and empowering their top leaders to make decisions. Because if we have over centralization with growing complexity and lot of volatility, it can become quite difficult to be fast in the market. Moving forward to the next slide, we also looked at another best practice where we said that how do you really plan capital expenditure in such volatility? Because I am suddenly reading news in the morning that, hey, COVID numbers are spiking in some of my big consumption states. How should I react? Should I go ahead and then make investments which are for the longer term? One of the best practice that we picked is nobody knows what's going to happen, but for sure the best way to approach it is to do detailed scenario planning and look at your manufacturing and footprint investments in the context of which direction the future is headed and what kind of possibilities exist. What we also found is one way to deal with volatility is to make sure that you do have enough reserves. So as you are making the investments, it's coming from your reserves rather than the money that you need for survival. Moving to best practice number 6. Next slide, please. And that's where we would like to highlight that a lot of companies, including OEMs, have realized that maybe some of the disruptive ideas that they need to excel in the market and to prepare for case need not necessarily be in-house. And therefore, there is a lot of emphasis on open innovation. Open innovation should involve engaging with startup community, with the academia, at the same time, driving open innovation within your own organization. How can I harness ideas which are out of the box and, channelize them towards, making them real and commercializing them? So investing in startups, as I mentioned, has been a big priority. And in fact, ACMA and PwC have launched a program together where we are, 2-3 months into this journey of helping ACMA members engage with the startups. And a lot of interesting ideas are coming from this discussion. Moving forward. So what does this all mean? And, like I said, we had the third question was, can we put this whole best practice together in some kind of framework that can help the industry as they look at dealing with volatility? And we brainstormed and came up with this acronym that is SafeNet. So we would like to say that, navigating through volatility can be achieved if you focus and make this as the fundamentals of your design principles of your organization. S stands for strong. To handle volatility, no way you can, handle it if you are operating on wafer thin margins, you have high debt equity, you don't have the ability to take a shock. So you really have to prepare to be strong and anticipate that, yes, there will be shocks along the way. Yes, you will have a new customer coming in and maybe, they will prefer to go for your competitor. So you need to prepare for that rainy day and make sure that we build enough reserves. A for agile. Companies will have to know and have to be agile to really approach the market and handle this effectively. F for flexible. We won't be able to, achieve the goals of, surviving and thriving in volatility if we are, not flexible at all. I'd like to spend a minute on network. I think this came up very clear message in all the leading companies that we spoke to, that now even more than before, working on your network is super important. And when we say network, we talk both about suppliers and customers. If you are just one of the suppliers for your key assets, then your business is going to be at risk. And you really need to reflect how you want to change that so that you have strategic partners both on the supplier as well as the customer side. E for enthusiastic. We've seen that companies with limited resource did exceedingly well when they had an enthusiastic and charged up team. And I think we should not underestimate the power of harnessing this talent. And T for technology enabled. We do need to continuously invest both in operating technology as well as in IT technology, because that is what is going to help us improve our productivity and increase our throughput without really adding as much to the cost. And we saw many examples of companies who are already doing this very effectively at that. And what we encourage companies as a next step is that, sit with this with your team, and you may download our detailed report which explains further details of SafeNet and how one should approach it. Do a self-assessment of how good you are on this framework, how ready you are for the next big volatility, both upside and downside. And make a task force, I would say, on how can you really coexist with these three states, preparing for survival, revival, and growth at the same time. So with that, thank you very much for your patient listening. And once again, I apologize for the technical glitch, and I also apologize to Dr. Goenka. Sorry for putting you in a spot, sir. But hopefully, this presentation and our findings was more than made up for it. Thank you very much.
We are a team, so and we can overcome. We always overcome. So this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And I loved your presentation. You covered forces that are creating volatility, backed it with a lot of case studies, and talked to us about best practices, usage of technology, leveraging technology, co-opetition, leadership, change in leadership roles, or reorganizing and reinventing people, scenario planning, and of course, engaging with startups for disruptive ideas. And I'm sure the slide on SafeNet will be remembered because a lot of lessons for the industry in a nutshell. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this session. Dr. Goenka, thank you so much for the profound advice that you have for the industry. And I must mention that, ladies and gentlemen, the entire report of PwC is available on the portal that you have logged in from today. So do make the best of it. And also there are other knowledge papers. These have been contributed by Crystal, Frost & Sullivan, and by Grant Thornton. So do download them and make the best of them. ACMA always gives you a lot of value. And thank you so much. We now close this session.